Before a friend of mine introduced me to the British anthology series Black Mirror, I'd never seen a TV show that was so heavily invested in relationships. The relationships between people and technology, between people and the media, people's relationships with the past and the present, and the show's primary focus, the relationships between people and other people. Because behind each episode, regardless of the postmodern premise they all share, is a consistent drive to show the relationship between two or more people. In fact, every episode follows this simple structure. It's a structure that the creator of the show, Charlie Brooker, seems to thrive off. After all, the show is known for its dark, satirical look at society and the effects that modern technology can have on people. Again, there's that word, people. It's the people, or should I say the characters, that make each episode. As we all know, it's great characters that make good TV. Their thoughts, their feelings and actions are what heighten the story, and what Black Mirror does better than any other show is create characters that play off each other in the best possible way. If I were to compare the show's anthological structure to that of The Twilight Zone or Tales of the Unexpected, I'm sure I wouldn't be the first. But where Black Mirror distances itself from those shows is in the way that the characters deal with their situations. For instance, Brooker's interest in the inauthenticity of the media, the government and technology itself remains prevalent in every episode, and the way he chooses to enhance that a lot of the time is to show the steady decline of the relationships between characters and the subject itself. In the episode The Entire History of You from Season 1, my personal favourite episode of the show, there are two relationships present that decline not only at the same pace, but they decline due to reacting to one another. The premise of the episode is that in the near future, people have access to an implant that records everything they see and hear. And the two relationships present in this episode are first between Liam and the Grain implant and how it affects his everyday life in good and bad ways, and secondly between Liam and his wife Fionn. Both are steadily weakening throughout the episode because of each other. It's the relationship between the two that prompts Liam to dig into his memories and abuse the implant, or Grain as it's called in the episode, and therefore it's the implant that allows Liam to pick apart the relationship and find the tainted history that it holds. By the end of the episode, Liam has not only ended his relationship, but he also ends his use of the Grain, because the information he found using the Grain was not information he wanted access to. And maybe without it, things would have turned out very different for him, since he wouldn't have become so paranoid about the whole situation. Perhaps it's wise to note that early on in the episode we meet a character who has already had her Grain removed. Though she states how excruciatingly painful it was, it cleverly sets the idea in the viewer's mind as well as in Liam's mind that such a thing is possible. It's clever foreshadowing by the writer, who interestingly enough is not Charlie Brooker. It's the only episode of the entire series from 1 to 3 that isn't written by him, in fact. Instead, creator of the English sitcom Peep Show Jesse Armstrong wrote the episode, and even though he didn't direct it, it can't be a coincidence that the visual style of the episode is strikingly similar to Peep Show, with the constantly moving camera angles, often in POV, and other times from voyeuristic vantage points. Actually, on a second viewing, it's hard to find a shot in the episode that isn't moving. It's unnerving, but it isn't distractingly unnerving. The camera doesn't take centre stage and take away from the story, but it drives the story. It heightens this idea of the record button always being on. Everything is captured, no matter how morally wrong or disturbing. Something else the creators seem to carry into the future episodes of the show and use to its full effect. Like in this episode, White Christmas, where we not only get to react to the character's unfortunate death, but we get to react to a character reacting to the same death. But I want to stay on The Entire History of You for the moment, especially its visual focus. Shots like these are really interesting since they're used throughout the show, where the juxtaposition between being together and being alone are created. The empty spaces in the frames are critical to the notion of broken relationships. An empty chair, an empty training bike, an empty staircase, even the empty city in the first episode. They amplify the arcs of the characters and the stories they function within. A final point I want to touch on is how information is withheld in the show. There's always a twist that changes the way we watch an episode second time around. In my previous example, the characters themselves get to re-watch prior events with us, allowing us to pick up on foreshadowing and subtle clues to the bigger picture, without having to go back and re-watch the episode. But I think that's part of the genius of the show. Like any good plot twists, they come unexpectedly and right out of left field, therefore changing the entire theme of an episode. Take a fan favourite like White Bear, for instance. In this episode, we're strung along with the character Victoria's nightmare. She is pushed to her breaking point and we feel helpless as viewers. We want her to find out what's going on so she can change it, because that's the way normal fiction wants us to react. But what Brooker does is subvert conventions by revealing that Victoria isn't the protagonist but the antagonist, and that she deserves everything that we've seen happen to her. This isn't what we expect from characters we've followed for an entire episode, and it leaves us feeling indecisive because now we know the truth, we have no one to support and cheer for. The character we know the most about is completely evil, and the other characters are purely actors that have staged the entire episode before a literal audience within the show. And that leaves us with one last relationship to be pondered, the relationship between the viewer and the show itself. Despite the way it leaves us emotionally, we keep watching and absorbing the information it feeds us. Maybe it's the truth in each episode that we appreciate. In the episode Nosedive, it's made apparent that the way we constantly judge and rate and review every aspect of each other's lives on social media and in everyday face-to-face interaction could possibly be leading us down a dark and twisted hole. When this video finishes, I too will be asking you to like the video and leave feedback so that more people can do the same. And I think it brings us back to the relationships between each other. Perhaps one day Nosedive will become a reality, and it won't be Facebook posts or YouTube videos that will be rating, but it will be each other, and every step we take, judged, rated, and monitored 24/7. It's a scary future we face, no doubt, and I'd like to think that maybe we can stand up and make a change against all of this and prove to the corporate clowns and monkeys in suits that we don't need to share every moment of our lives on social media and present false representations of ourselves just to file in more and more money to corporations that feed off of our insecurities and weaknesses. If you agree with me, please speak out and say something before there's no time left and it's too late.